My special guest today should be sent a thank you letter from everyone that's ever foiled. He's widely known as the godfather of the Moth Class and the inventor of the Wasp. Welcome, Andrew Amac McDougall. Welcome aboard, Andrew. Thanks for coming on Ronstan Shooting the Breeze.
Thanks, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
So today we're going to have a bit of a chat about KA Sail, the company that you own and founded, your Moth history, the Mac 2, which very proudly your boat, Moths in general. We're going to jump into the Wasp, which is this awesome up-and-coming boat that's dominating youth sailing and sailing in general as well. And then we're going to get a bit of a conclusion about where you see sailing going in the future. So let's jump straight into it and have a chat about KA Sail. So first off, what is KA Sail? What does KA mean?
Kick-ass, of course. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know it was called kick-ass. No.
No, actually. So when we bowed out of Wild Winds, which was a windsurfing brand that we had, we went into partnership with a Japanese guy, and he'd already put in an order for 1,000 windsurf sails, but we needed a name, and in Japan, everything was already registered. You just could not register a name. It's like the internet now. If you probably KA Sail would be registered on the internet if you hadn't already done it. So KA were the letters on the sails back then, and so Kasail was the Japanese version of it, and we could register it. So it was just really that we're trying to find something that had some link with Australia and what have you. It turned out we couldn't register the company as KA Sail because they said, well, that's the sailing name, you can't do it. So it wasn't until it changed to AUS that we were allowed to register it as KA Sail.
Oh, so, Jesus.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's always interesting to me. What's KA Sail? I thought you might have had a different name back in the day, like Kevin Anderson or something like that. But no.
Good old Kev.
Very good. So the company, as you said, started as a windsurfing company.
Well, yeah, KA Sail definitely started as a windsurfing company, but Wild Winds before that was also a windsurfing company, which we were building sails here in Australia, which was really difficult at the time because there was 20% import duty on materials and a 5% import duty on sails. So we were really battling it, trying to build sails here. And eventually we moved the factory to Fiji, which was just a bit of a disaster actually, because just trying to get stuff in and out, trying to communicate, we were communicating by fax. To even send a fax, you had to book it a day in advance to send a fax out. You imagine that compared to today?
Wow.
Losing stuff in the customs warehouse and then getting the permission to search the warehouse and finding that they'd use the box as a card table. So, something we didn't have for 6 weeks and not being able to manufacture because we had no needles or something like that. It was just crazy. So really difficult. And eventually the whole thing really folded in Fiji. So Tom Ledecky and I came back. Well, Tom was just one of our sponsored sailors, but he contacted me and says, "Do you want to start a new brand?" And that's where we got a partnership with a Japanese windsurfing distributor, created the name KA Sail because of this limitation or difficulty of finding the name, and then started KA in 1991. So it's Tom Ledecky and I, who was I don't know whether you know him, he was a World Cup sailor, sort of top 5 for many years in the World Cup with windsurfing. And we ran it together for 5 years, and eventually he decided to go up north and I bought it off him. And so being the sole owner of KA, sorry, my wife is the other half. Better get it right.
The better half.
Yeah, the better half. The better half. The law. Anyway, so since 95, it's been 100% owned by me. So yeah, we were building windsurf sails from 91 till 2007 really, and then kept doing it a little bit while we had the Blade Rider and the Mac 2. But eventually it just became such a small part of the business, so I licensed the name out to a guy in Europe. So they're still being made. There still are KA windsurfing sales, not very big, but it's there.
Oh, wow, fascinating. So as you said, the company evolved over the years from being a windsurfer brand to what it is today, being, Mac 2 boats and Wasps.
Yeah, well, windsurfing was always shrinking back then. And really, I was... The Moth was always, for me, the hobby thing. And I always wanted to keep it the hobby thing. It was something I could tinker with and not have to worry about how anyone else was going to like it. Not have to build two of them, because building one was enough pain in itself of getting everything super light, super strong, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't until it was about 2000 when the narrow skiff turned up in Melbourne. I hadn't sailed Moths for probably 18 years and looked at it and I thought, got to give that a go. So that was a few years before foiling became really accepted. There was a foil around then, but not so much. So by 2005, I'd actually spent 9 years working in software, so running KA on the side. So from 97 to 2005, something like that, I was running a software team, developing software, which was a lot of fun. But all the stuff I've done actually has been almost bringing me to this point of now, learning about software, learning about, I did engineering I have a degree in engineering, which I never really used in a classic way. I built a lot of boats, made my own sails, and just everything came together to be where, and sailed a lot, of course, just loving it. I mean, particularly with foiling. Foiling has just been it's made me just want to go out sailing. I was getting to that point where it was like, it's particularly on Port Phillip Bay where it's pretty wild and you got to have a bit of physical oomph about you to go out some days, and you're just looking out there going, oh, do I really want to do that? No more with foiling. It's just like, I want to get out there. I want to do it. And so, yeah, there was a transition. This is all jumping around a bit, so maybe you want to keep it.
So we'll jump into your Moth history. You made your first boat at 15. What was that, and how did it go?
It was a scow, of course. Back then in Australia, that's all there was. I built it to the Victorian Association set of plans. My dad built me a shed out the back that was 11'6" long, which is 6 inches longer than a Moth, because that was all it could fit between the tree and the fence. So lucky I was skinny, so I could get around the ends of it. I remember my dad dropping me at the plywood store, and I weighed 400 sheets of plywood and picked out 4 lightest ones. Then came home and on the lounge room floor with a hand plane, planed half of a veneer off each side.
Wow.
So that was actually the second boat, but it was probably a year later. I was, from day one, I was absolutely thinking about how to make this strong enough and how to make it light enough. And I think at the first national championships I went, my boat was 6 pounds, which 3 kilograms lighter than anyone else's boat, and never broke. So just fully into it. And I remember Dad going, one day I'm going to come out there and it's going to be a 4x2 down the keel. You don't touch my boat. The only thing he was allowed to do was use your circular saw to cut up the things, because my sister had cut her fingers off on that, so it was no go.
Safety first. That's right. So you started off, you at 15 in Moths, and did you stayed around for a little while, but then you had a break and went into kite surfing, windsurfing, and you came back at about, what, 2000, you said?
Well, that was the fourth comeback, really.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I think that my dad died when I was 17. So, and I remember him watching about 6 months before he died. He watched a race which I won at the state championships, and he's driving me home and says, "Why are you faster than those other guys?" And I thought, wow, that's a really weird thing to say to your son. But yeah, I was just just completely obsessed with it. I built my own mast. I built a wing mast back when I was 16. I think I had 5 rigs on the boat by the time I was 17. So when my dad died, I sort of went a little bit feral. I mean, get a car, you're going to university. So yeah, I still sailed, but I sort of dropped out of the Moth, dropped out of that sort of stuff. And it wasn't until 6 years later, when the Australian Championships had done a full cycle of Australia, and it came back to Tasmania. And my dad had died while I was in Tasmania sailing the national championships. And I just sort of thought, I'll go back to Tasmania with the Moth, and I'm going to get top 5 in memory of my dad. And I learnt, don't ever say top 5, say win, because I got 5th. Damn it. So that was the first comeback, and I stayed with that and transitioned to skiffs. A mate of mine bought a skiff back from the UK, wanted to sell it, said, "You want to sail this so I can sell it?" So I was living in New South Wales at the time. Sailed, won a couple of states up there in the skiff, and fell in love with it. I just said, "This is so much better." And so continued with the skiffs for a while, and then basically started windsurfing in between 1980 and 85 on the old Wallies, and then probably by early mid 80s built my own windsurfer, raceboard type thing. Travelled to Europe, sailed the World Cup, and made some sales for it, and came back, and this guy who made the windsurf sales in his loft and said, "Do you want to get in with me in the business?" And that was Wild Wings. So pretty much gave me a half share of the business in Wild Wings. And so that's really how I started. I mean, up to that point, I did work as an engineer for a while, and had my own businesses. I fixed cars for quite a while, just sort of loving life, really. Never really wanting for anything, never needing to work that hard. So yeah, it was a mix of work and sailing, and so in that period, in it was 85 when we started this Wild Wings thing, and it was sort of like, well, if I'm going to do this properly, I've got to windsurf, and I've got to not sail. So pretty much did not sail from 85 till 2001, I think.
Wow.
So it was all windsurfing.
Yes.
But what was really interesting is in the crossover between 80 to 85 and working on windsurf sales and working on the Moth sales, such massive crossover where I was learning stuff in the Moth that translated into the windsurf. So I'm making really good windsurfing sales, and then developing stuff in the windsurfing, and always, so many people were going, "Oh, that's completely wrong. You've got way too much twist in that sail. It's never going to work. It's too floppy at the top," and pretty much pioneered that whole floppy top thing, and came and just worked with them off. And really, I think what was really good about it is it was understanding not that this one way worked, but understanding that in this situation where you've got this much leverage and this much power, you needed this sort of sail, and so getting a really deep knowledge of how sails worked, and also foils, because we were developing windsurf foils at that point. Wrote around software for designing the foils, did a lot of 2D analysis on foils. So it's such a huge crossover between the two.
Yeah, right. So then in 2006, you launched the Blade Rider, which was really the first production foiling moth. Tell me about the Blade Rider.
Well, I mean, foiling, the bifoiler, and this is history that's probably well known, but the bifoiler was really started by John Eilert and his brother Garth over in WA. And there was a sort of group of them who were playing with foils. There was Brett Burble, who created the trifoiler, which won a couple of races at the World Championships in 2000, but then everyone decided that really wasn't a single hull boat, effectively, which was absolutely correct. And at the same time, John was playing with the bifoiler. So I was semi-back in moths at that point. I was working with Rowan as a coach. Well, not working, but you know what I mean. And there was the World Championships in 2005 in Blackrock. And at that point, I was making moth sails again. Not sailing the moth, but making moth sails, which is another story you might want to go into with Emmett and Tim Webster. But so at that championship, I stopped sailing moths again, and I really wasn't doing much sailing, but just saw these guys foiling around and just sold a lot of moth sails to all these guys at the championship. I pretty much had a pocket full of cash, so I said, damn it, I'll buy one. So I bought the original foiler. I bought Garth's boat that all the prototyping had been done on, and just fell in love with it immediately. I had so many bruises and cuts, and back then it was a little harder to learn because we were also learning how to actually make the boat work as well as learning how to sail it. So that was sort of the point where I went, I really want to do this. And the job with the software company was coming to an end. The company had been sold to Americans, so it was like, let's do this. And the initial thought was to do it with John Eilert, and that was going well until John just stopped answering the phone. And one day I called him on another phone and I said, what's going on? He said, oh, I don't need you guys, I'll do it by myself. And I went, okay. And there was smoke coming out of my ears, and I went, stuff it. So I just took all the stuff I'd learnt with the windsurfing, all the analysis, and I was probably the first by a long way to really go deeply into the flow analysis on the foils. And in the end, when we launched the Blade Rider, our calculation said the foil should be 12% faster, almost completely across the range from top to bottom.
Yeah, right.
And you got on the boat, and that was almost correct. It was like the foils at that point was so draggy that they were the biggest, the critical point of the speed of the boat. So when we put these foils on, and yes, we had a bit of sail as well, we were just super quick, and we just completely blew everything else out of the water. Yeah, so it was definitely the first proper production boat.
And then we'll jump into the Mac 2 now. Like 2 years later, 2008, the Mac 2's launched and it's basically dominated the Moth class for the last 12 years. Like, what's made the Mac 2 stand the test of time?
I think really that I find it really hard to put out something that on paper, as in all the analysis we do, I don't know anything I could do to make it better.
Really?
I can't, and this is a real problem for me because it means that I don't put stuff out very often. And the Mac 2 nearly killed me, or seriously nearly killed me, because I'd split with my partner with Blade Rider, and I got a phone. I sailed the Blade Rider for another year. Came second in the world that year, and that was because all the pressure came off. I didn't have to worry about anyone else. I was just tinkering with my own boat, and then I got a call from McConaughey going, "We're throwing Blade Rider out of the factory." Why? And I said, "Well, we've found out they're planning to build all their boats that we've prototyped in Taiwan, and all their molds are sitting out the front of the factory now, ready for them to collect. We want to do a boat with you." And I went, "Why not?" And the thing is, we were both angry with this guy, and so it was a fantastic partnership, and we're both really good engineers, so we were just bouncing stuff back and forth for weeks about how we should build it, how, you know, the laminates, everything, and whether we should use Nomex, whether, you know, we tested all that sort of stuff and came up with a, you know, absolutely brilliant, I think, core of sandwich construction of the Mac 2, and it's absolutely stood the test of time, that one. And just the way we joined it, the way we, you know, we just thought through everything with that. And then I was given this task now of creating a foil that was better than the Blade Rider, and it was really difficult because I'd put my heart and soul. I spent nearly probably 9 man-months analysing foils for the Blade Rider.
Wow.
I was so determined that I would have something that was just better all round. And then it was really hard to find something. And then I was almost about to commit to moulds, and I came up with an epiphany of just one little change in the trailing edge mainly that changed the game. And suddenly I had this foil that was almost the same leap again from the Blade Rider to the Mac 2. So that was sort of like, thank God for that, because we did the Blade Rider the Mac 2 in almost 6 months from way to go. It was a massive effort. Obviously, a lot of stuff already set up. You know, I had all the software set up for doing the hull, the foils. We had, you know, analysis stuff all set up. So we had a lot of things going on. I had a very committed boat builder who wanted to get it done really quick and blow Blade Rider out of the water, and so yeah, it was. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, everything we do in the Blade Rider is always in the Mac 2 or any of the things I do. I can't morally put something out there that I don't know is better. If I can't do it better, I'll just let the competition take it. And I've done that with sales a number of times where I've gone, I don't know how to make our sale better, so I'm not going to change it. If people think the other sales are better, I'll just keep watching until I can see what I can do that's going to be not only better than our sale, but better than their sale. Otherwise, I'm not going to put it out there because I don't want to waste people's money. I want people to buy stuff and have a good time with it. I mean, I make mistakes, but it's just I can't let it go. It's something wrong with my psyche.
Well, you're up to the Mac 2.6, and the 2 being the crucial number in that, being that almost I think it's the same hull from the Mac 2, the original boat, and you can, if you bought a Mac 2 back in the day, you could update it now to make it a 2.6. That's one of the best things about the Mac 2 is you can put any of the add-ons and be up to the one of the current boat that's now being sold by yourselves there at KA Sales. So tell me about the 2.6 and how it's got to where it's got to now.
The 2.6 specifically, or just the whole things?
I look happy for you to run me through how you've evolved it over the years. I mean, obviously you just said you're very passionate in it, and nothing that's gone onto the boat is clearly a disadvantage. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, trying to remember all the steps, but probably the biggest step was there's been some really big changes that changed the boat a lot. And one, you know, we can't take any credit for is the bowsprit. But what I couldn't get around was that I had a boat with a bowsprit on it for 2 years before we released the bowsprit. And, you know, everyone was going with bowsprits, and it was definitely an improvement, but not much, the one I had. And it wasn't until we put this linkage in the middle of it to give us the type of response of the flap to the wand that we wanted, that suddenly it just came to life. And it was just like, you know, sometimes you do these things and you go out and you go sailing, and it's like everyone says, well, how much have you tested it? I sailed for 5 minutes and that was enough. You know, sometimes it's just so obvious that this is better. And that was one of them. And, you know, the guys at, I think at Rocket pretty much put that on. I think even Islet had one on for a while back in the day. But for me, it wasn't until I had something that was like, this is really good. This is something I know that I can say to anyone, you put this on the boat, you're going to have a better time. And that was probably the first thing. There was a lot of things in between. You know, we obviously did a lot of sail development. We made the boat a lot stronger, and not that you can't make an old boat strong enough to do. There's a few things, and we're actually doing a lot of documentation on that at the moment, of how to take an old boat and make it as strong as you want, as strong as the current ones. And so, but the skin and the basic structure of it's all still really good. So that was the first thing. The next thing that really happened after that was we did a lot of stuff. Well, actually the next thing was the sail. The skirt and the lower sail was amazing. We ran around with a sail that was designed to have a skirt and have a fairing behind the deck, but we never put it on, and we sailed with that for 6 months, and it was not that slow, even though it was lower and actually had less sail area. And then we finally got the skirt sort of working, stuck on with double-sided tape, went out sailing, and oh my God, it was just like, why are we bothering racing together? Because this boat is suddenly going higher and faster than where we were before. And unfortunately, at that point, we were doing the Wasp, so we really never capitalised on that side of it. And so, and when we went to the 2007 Worlds, which Pete Burling got second in, the boat wasn't finished. It broke in one race, and so we just didn't really have the manpower here to take on the marketing and get it finished, really. And the boat looked a mess and blah, blah, blah. There was about 5 different boats and a lot of different bits and pieces. But anyway, so that was a really big change. But it wasn't, so the next thing that's been more recent, it was the wing bars. And that was another one where it was pretty rushed. I'd been conceptualizing in the head what it should look like. We'd done a lot of CFD on the hull when we had 3 or 4 engineers here at one point, and we're doing the Wasps, and we're doing Mac 2 stuff as well, and doing fluid analysis. So we knew what the flow should be like, and we knew how we could get the hull to be part of the sail effectively, part of the whole package of driving the boat forward rather than being a draggy thing. And so, you know, obviously I wasn't going to go down the path of fixed wings. I mean, one of the things we've always been is it's got to be practical. Nothing we do is about putting stupid stuff on. Like, that's why I've been always against the wing sail, the fixed wings, and just trying to work out around how to make a practical boat go fast, a boat that everyone loves to sail but still can win a championship. So that's always been a big focus for us, and that was even the same with the windsurfing sail. But these wing bars, and I put them on just before Christmas a couple of years ago, and went out sailing, and it was like, wow, that feels really good, but let's see what happens when we attack. And I was watching the GPS, looking at what angles are going, and attack. I'm going, oh my God, it was just insane. The difference was just another one of those massive leaps. We had the bowsprit, the sail, then the wing bars, and they're all leaks that took me 2 minutes of sailing to go, we've really got this right. Sure, we could refine this and refine that and make it better, I don't know, but I think the amount of analysis we do, we always get it pretty right first time. So that was the 2.5. So the 2.6 was more a practical thing, is that the bowsprit was a bit cobbled on really in the 2.5 and earlier. So I really wanted to make that much more integrated and less friction, less failure points. And it makes a huge difference because you don't need as much bungee to keep the wand forward. It's basically, I sail with no bungee most of the time now because there's enough pressure in the foil to push the wand forward. Occasionally, if it's really blowing, you need it to offset the wind blowing the wand back, or if it's big waves, you want it to flick forward really fast. But generally, in most sailing conditions, no bungee, which is a huge change. It changed the way the wand is affecting the foils. It changes the way, just the drag on the wand, the amount of spray that's coming up in your face sometimes even. So the 2.6 is really just trying to simplify that whole system of the bowsprit, and that reduction in friction is really, really important.
Fair enough. Are we going to see a Mach 3 one day?
Don't know.
I mean, if the Mach 2 nearly killed you, shit, we don't want to see the die from building the Mach 3.
And it's exactly the point, actually, is that it's insane how much work it is. And particularly if you want to have all the documentation and you've got to have engineering drawings. I mean, every other boat we've done, I've had 2 or 3 engineers here to help with that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have that at the moment. I'm really enjoying working by myself on the engineering side, and the focus at the moment with the company is just little things with the Mach 2, and we're doing a lot of documentation on it. But obviously, with making sure the Wasp works well, and every little thing that comes up with the Wasp is just making sure that we're either changing design or changing design and sending out replacements to anyone who's got the old one. So there's a fair bit of work there. But I have a fully formed boat in the head.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and it's very different to everything else that's out there.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say there's some new and different designs around now. So yeah, different to them. That's going to be. I look forward to seeing it, Amac. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the 2.6 behind me. If you can see, that's the. Oh, that's like the 2.5, I think, isn't it? Right, bowsprit.
Photoshopped an old guy sailing my boat on it.
He does pretty well, and I may have sailed against you once or twice, and he gave me a belting, so that was fun. Let's jump into the moths as a whole now, and we've spoken about it a little bit already, but almost all moth designs now have these really aggressive angled wings. What's the gain from this? Is it an aero advantage? Is it a riding moment advantage? What is it? It is?
It's both, yeah. It's a riding moment advantage if you don't have the angled wings that we've gone to with those curves. Curves don't have to be exactly like that, but you definitely have to have a really nice entry for the leeward wing and a really nice exit, and you've got to direct the flow so that you're using that wing as a sail, which most of the other boats don't have. So we've got one of the things that's really helped us is that the hull lends itself to creating forward thrust along with the wing frame. And initially, the smaller wings, like the what's that funny one? Beaker one, is less drag. But what we've done is going, yeah, well, we've actually got more drive. So in effect, we're getting a better result. by angling the wings up, you definitely get more righting moment. By making the foils longer, you get more righting moment. Both of them make the boat really hard to deal with, but the guys who are winning are learning how to do that. So I'm trying to tread the middle road with that. Something that makes the boat easy to sail, keeps the boat easy to sail, but gives us the advantage. Would I go higher than what we've done? We're about 80 mil higher than we were. For flat water, not a chance. Wouldn't do it. For the bay, possible, but we never race on somewhere like the bay. I mean, when I'm talking about the bay, I'm talking about Port Phillip Bay, where sometimes we're racing in probably 1.5 metre waves, and it's having that height really helps.
So the aero advantage is on the windward side or the leeward side? Like how is it working?
It's definitely the leeward side. The windward side doesn't do that much. It's the leeward side where you're grabbing the flow that's coming around over the bow, it's coming around the side, and you're basically redirecting it to exhaust out the back of the boat. And so you're getting this curve of the wind very similar to what you've got with the sail. So the higher that wing is, the more effective that is. And there's another advantage that is really quite weird, is that it's creating downforce. So that means that when you're going slow, that downforce is minimal, which is what you need because you want to get up. When you're going very fast, it's actually opposing the foil, which is what you need because you've got a foil that's bigger than what you really want when you're going fast, so you can get up. And as you go faster, the foil is getting outside its drag bucket. It's got too much lift, so you're either putting negative flap angle in or you're angling the foil down, and both of those are quite draggy. And done a lot of research about what is the optimum combination to get and that's why you see us sailing bow down a lot, to get that angle right. But so that you don't have to have too much flap up. But by getting this downforce on the wings, which was there before, but it was associated with drag, and now as we're going faster, we're just getting less drag and more downforce on that leeward side. And so as you're going faster, it's opposing the foil, keeping the foil in its drag bucket, in its low drag bucket. So the thing just works. And you really notice with these wings is that as you point the boat higher and go, it actually accelerates. And so, all this stuff comes together. The boat's almost like being compressed and pushed out like a pip. It's it's sail area at a very low aspect. So it's, even though it is requiring more righting force to have it there, you can have that sail lower, which we're doing, and still getting the same sorts of power.
Yeah, right. I'd hate to think of how many foils you've designed over the years. Will evolution of foil design ever slow down? I mean, we've seen them get slightly taller and on the verticals, and then the horizontals are getting narrower and longer. How far can you go until you've kind of hit that ceiling?
Well, I always answer that question with, if you're down the beach and you watch the seagull flying, how much more advanced is that wing compared to where we are?
Don't know.
It's insanely better than what we've got. And it's not because the shape's better, it's because the way they're controlling it is better. They're controlling every part of it almost. And so with current materials and technologies, we're getting closer to what works. And I think with foils, it's going to become more about designing for the venue if you're going to an event.
Okay.
So, and it's going to change if they restrict to one foil, which I believe they should do. So you've got to have a more all-round foil. it would change between sailing on the bay here to sailing on Lake Garda. So the changes are becoming very microscopic on just a gain saying, take this foil, let's make it faster.
Yeah, right.
Our 2.1 foil compared to the 2.0 foil compared to previous foils, some of the changes in the section shape were sub 0.2 of a millimetre, and the difference in the drag was insane.
Okay.
And so just the way you sand it makes a huge difference. So yeah, we're getting closer to what can be. What we do around the intersection is definitely going to have some gains because we're limited with structure there. We want to keep it so you can take the foil apart because that it's got to fit the box. That's part of our thing. What happens at the tips? I think there's a lot of work that can be done there. Because
there's some foils out there that have got fixed tips and some that don't.
Yeah, we're on fixed tips at the moment. Definitely an improvement, and also the longevity of the foil because you don't have that Kevlar hinge going all the way to the tip, which can fail, get loose. So, how much more to go? So there's two things that change with this. One is it becomes event specific. So yeah, you need a smaller foil and it's flatter water, so you don't need as a tolerant foil like the foil that works on Garda can be an absolute dog on the bay here because of the turbulence in the water. So you can design around that with the sections, turbulent tolerant sections, and it's all pretty analysable, that stuff. But the next thing that I don't know when is going to come, and maybe be outlawed when it does come, but we'll get to the point where we're dynamically changing the shape of the foil as we go along.
Wow.
And that changes everything because you can end up with a much smaller foil that'll get you up.
Next step, hey?
Well, we already do it. We have a flap. But there's just more that can happen.
Yeah, geez, okay. All right, we'll leave that one there.
Well, the foil might cost you $100,000, but
oh no, don't do that. The deck sweepers, we've already had a chat about it, and you said it was definitely a game changer because, I mean, I've been around the Moth class and spoken to a few people, and I know back in the day we were seeing 15 knots upwind speed, but now we're seeing 20s, 21s as Tom was doing at the Worlds out there. What's next for the KA deck sweeper? Are we seeing something changing or?
Yeah, well, everyone's been going longer in the skirt. Our analysis in the first days were definitely a long skirt was better. We didn't really think it was as better as what everyone seems to be saying. We are going to do a longer skirt, but again, I want to keep the boat saleable. I want to be able to sell it to some guy on a lake in Canada and he has a lot of fun, and the same boat is going to be sailed by some guy at a world championship. Whether we are going to be the sail of choice for the top guys, again, I don't know. I don't have that team anymore.
Yeah.
A team like we had in the past of people who are going to win a world championship is quite expensive, and we don't really. It's not our real business model anymore to have that. So I believe our current sail, with the batten and cam tweaks that we now have, is incredibly quick.
Okay.
And I don't think we are at a disadvantage with the materials, and we're not going to jump in with North and get them to make our sails because it's just too expensive.
Yeah.
And the carbon we've put in the sails has just made a dramatic difference. Sure, we will possibly test other materials again, but every time we do that, we just come back and go, not enough difference. For me, I got to get on a boat and I can just go, in that 2 minutes, I just know that spending that extra money is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, right.
And as I said before, so yes, I really believe our current rig, the current mast, and there's not many out there really, with the current battens, which the battens are a lot stiffer in the back and a lot softer in the front than where they were at the start of the MH4 when we started distributing it. The cams are now 3D printed. We do them in-house here now, and they rotate, which we definitely had some problems with in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tweaked a lot of things that have made the sail really good.
Okay.
And we'll be looking at the skirt in the next batch of sails we make.
Perfect. I want to move on to maybe a bit of development in the rig. I've seen people lately try the wing mast, like the akin, and I've seen people try it back in the day. Is that a next step for the Moth?
Well, when I was 16, I made a wing mast exactly like that. It had a small square on the back, so it wasn't quite what you got with the A-class with the pear shape. And it was ridiculously fast in a very small range of conditions.
Right, okay.
And I did sail one race with it and went really well. And then another race, I think I was in that period I was talking about earlier, where it was just so slow that it was ridiculous. So the current rig is really difficult to make that leap, in that you would, we've tried it. I've got a couple of wing masts here, the pear-shaped ones that we've played around with.
Because if you look at your current rig, with the way the sail wraps around the mast like a windsurf, it's basically a wing already, you would have thought.
Exactly. And really the gain that you can possibly have with the pear wing sort of mast is ideally you should be able to use it to be able to control the sail better. So you can de-rotate it like you do in the A-class, and you can rotate it and blah, 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 power it up and depower it. But it just seems to be, we've never got close to being to a point where we feel that it's a really big gain anywhere, let alone better across the range.
Yeah, okay.
There's always been somewhere that it's just horrible, whether it's trying to depower it in high winds or trying to power it up in light winds. It's just never had that real, this is a game changer. So just hasn't been worth it, because a mast like that can add quite a lot of complexity to the build, of course.
Well, there's added weight, so there's a factor of that.
Yep.
And cost. I mean, they're not a cheap thing. The a foil, what do you call it? A wing mast, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
So, I want to jump into the systems on a Moth, because there's some quite complex systems. We put a photo up of Tom Burton's Vang a while back in one of our social medias posts, and it was a 48-to-1 Vang, and that blew a lot of people's minds. We got a lot of messages back saying 48-to-1, like, you got to be kidding. Like, talk me through, like, why is 48-to-1 required on a Moth Vang?
I use 48-to-1. It's just, I'll keep my language, a lot of load. I mean, it's just massive loads on it.
Do you know what we're seeing load-wise on a Vang, on a Moth, in a Vang system?
Yeah, we did measure it. It's it's just on. It averages about 1,100 kilos.
Wow.
Doesn't actually change that much, to be perfectly honest. We had a load cell on the Clue, which you can do the calcs, and it was almost consistently 90 kilos, no matter what you did. You
900 kilos or 90 kilos?
90 kilos on the Clue, not on the.
Yep.
You multiply out the distance of your masthead, and it was really weird. It was a range of only about 30% from, loaded to really loaded. The wind didn't seem to make that much difference, just everything. So it is a fair whack load on a bang system. So you need to get it. And the thing is, I'm going to plug your brand here for you, because you let me have a couple of your prototype high load blocks that you put on the boat, and the difference. And I've always been against having the friction rings on anything, because they are what they are. They're friction rings. They're horrible. But I've had some of the very older style low friction pulleys that you don't even make anymore. I've had Harkin rollers on there. I've had I think what did we replace? I can't remember what we replaced. Anyway, put those on. Put one at the boom and one at the next cascade down, and suddenly it was so much easier to pull the bang on that I almost said I can drop a cascade, go from basically 48 to 1 to 24 to 1. Haven't done it yet, but yeah. So you've got to you're pulling against a ton, and then you're probably going to 2 tons with all the friction. So, yeah, it's a fair whack.
So another system is this new 2-staged downhaul system that you're seeing boats use to be able to pull the main part of the sail down, but you've also got to be able to pull the skirt or the deck sweeper down. I know the Mac 2s do a downhaul that actually runs along the deck of the boat.
Yep.
So
yeah, I don't know. That's it. It's I don't quite understand what they're trying to achieve. We don't do it. We definitely, one of the things that took us a while to figure out, and we originally had our cano going to both sides. So we had 2 canos. So you would pull the cano down on leeward side, so you get the maximum amount of depth at the bottom, and you get the cam to rotate. It was a pain in the ass, and we stopped doing it, and it wasn't enough gain. But by just putting the cano pulling from the very bottom of the boat, and we've got a fair distance because we've got a foredeck and what have you. So that's enough to get enough offset at that bottom of the sail to get the flow around the bottom of the sail. So I don't think we needed to go with this thing of having the skirt or the luff being pulled down. So yeah, but you see behind your head, our skirt is a bit wrinkly, but again, it doesn't seem to make that much difference.
Okay.
It's really closing that gap that makes the difference. And we originally started with having a solid front to it, and I've still found a couple in the factory where we built off an old wing mast. We just flopped it over and had it wrapped inside the mast, and that smoothed up the whole area.
Yeah.
But just one of those things is like, take it out and can you notice a difference?
Okay, well, let's jump on to rig tension and rig canting. Now, back in, when was it? When Pete won the Worlds at Sorrento, canting rigs was a big thing, but that's kind of gone away now, hasn't it?
Yep.
Why was that?
Because you can't tack.
Oh, okay. There you go.
It's really as simple as that. Is that you can hold the boom over to leeward or to the whichever side the boom's on, and so tacking becomes a bit unpredictable.
Okay.
My experience, and pretty much I started with the completely slack rig in 2010, and had a lot of cant, and I still sail with cant, but my theory is I can't tack anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay. But the next version, the Mac 3, won't have that problem.
Okay, well, there you go. You'll be able to tack.
Yeah, so cant, I really do believe cant has its place, but the tacking is just horrible.
Fair enough. And rig tension, you using much of that?
To finish on that is that because we got these stiffer sails and more bang tension and more cano tension, that's just accentuated the problem to the point where you can sometimes go into attack and what's the boom still sitting on the wing for? I've got to go there, but it's just not gone over.
All right.
Yeah.
And
Anyway,
rig tension, you're using lots of that? What happens with that?
I don't have any rig tension.
Okay, no rig tension for you.
If you see again in the picture behind you, the leeward stay is completely slack.
All right, righto. Wand controls, because wand and bowsprit. So my first thing was probably let's talk about the bowsprit. What does it do? Why did you go from having a little mechanism on the bow to now having it? I'd say it's probably half a meter further forward on basically a bowsprit. What is the bowsprit achieving on the boat?
Well, especially as we're riding higher and higher, the wand was getting closer and closer to the centerboard. And that means the time from the wand registering a wave to when the wave is at the foil is almost zero. So, and back in 2005, there was a whole movement to put the wand on the foil itself, on the vertical front foil. So it was actually behind, and that was a complete disaster when they worked well on the Swan, but it wouldn't work in waves at all. So the bowsprit basically increases the time that the foil's got to react, and so it's really as simple as that. If you have
just giving that separation between the foil and the wand, really, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Rightio. Let's jump on to my next question. GPS units. Moth Class is renowned for them. Useful training aid?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I cannot stress enough, if you are sailing without a GPS, and almost like, especially if you're sailing with a group of people without a GPS. And I've seen it so many times where people go out and train and they think they're all fast, but they're not, because they're all sailing bad angles. So you need the GPS not only for when you're sailing by yourself to check how your things are going. You need it when you're sailing in a group. You need a few people sailing in a group going, yeah, guys, we're going really fast, but our VMG was shit.
Now, this has to be a displayable GPS that you can see while you're sailing, or is a wristwatch enough?
I really think you need a displayable one. Really.
I mean, I've heard Tom Slingsby talk a bit about after his World's win, and he would see speeds and know that he had to change modes, that, if he was doing something, he could foot and go and get the 22 or 23 knots uphill that he needed to go to. So clearly a big benefit for the class. Next one, fairings. How important are these to the Moth, aero-wise? Because you go around the boat park. I was lucky enough to be at Perth to see it, and people had bits of carbon stuck on the back of wings and around the foot of the boat to try and, create that deck plate effect. So is that something that you believe in too, or is it a bit of a wish-washy thing?
Well, I don't think it's wish-washy, because I'd be hypocritical if I said that, because in Perth I stuck a whole lot of fairings on my boat. And they were just tape, really, and it was just closing up every gap I could.
Okay.
And it's something I wouldn't bother with sailing normally, but around where the wing tramp is getting near the hull and you've got a gap, I was taping that up. Where the ropes go through, where it didn't need to have the gap, I'd tape it up. Really annoying for normal sailing, but yeah, it's getting rid of all these little holes is really important, and which sort of brings me to, why did I not have the fairing behind the cockpit? Because for some ridiculous reason we found it made almost no difference. I know there's some that disagree with me, but I think especially with these new wing bars, everything we tried showed that the airflow was almost directly back off the foredeck, and it was not going underneath the sail hardly at all. And so when we put the deck fairing in, all it did was become very annoying of seeing all the controls and being able to fix something, and rig it. But yeah, I actually spent a bit of time with telltales all over the boat, and also with the telltale on a stick, which at 20 knots is
Bloody hard to hold on to. Yeah.
But yeah, just watching the flow underneath between the bottom of the sail and so as long as the sail comes to the foredeck, we're directing that flow exactly the direction we go. And so if there's no pressure, there's no point in having the hole fixed. But some of these places, yeah. But yeah, some of the fairings are wank. But
okay, look, a historical thing, Blade Rider to now. How much faster are the boats going? And are we going to see that jump again in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I reckon.
Okay.
So 2007, when I had a Blade Rider going absolutely flat stick, and it was probably I think the Worlds of 2007 in Weymouth, 2007, 2008. Oh, anyway, whatever. 2008 it was. Yep. And yeah, the old boat handling did me in, but it was really quick. And with GPSN, 15 knots upwind, I could do for a few minutes. But after that, I mean, this is good angles, and we're not talking crappy angles. They're good angles, like probably tacking through 100 degrees, maybe 105, sometimes a bit better than that. Not as good as we can do now. I mean, we can do much better than that now, but not necessarily as quick. So at that time, probably a normal Blade Rider was doing 14 in a squirt, and probably 13 sometimes. So we've gone to from 13. I know that Tom was doing 21s and plus, but that was pretty ideal conditions. Very flat water, pretty windy. So realistically, 18 knots is a pretty nice speed to be sitting on upwind these days. You can get it's a good compromise if you're sailing in waves, not just getting completely blown out of the water. Good angles and rah. So let's say effectively we've gone from 14 knots to 18 knots.
Okay.
It's a big change. So the next stage of comfortably sailing, so 18, 22 knots comfortably with blats of maybe 26 knots when you've got the ideal conditions. Doable? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, that's promising. I love it. My next question is about the Moth Class as a whole. What makes the Moth Class so appealing? Because it just seems like it grows from strength to strength. It attracts big fleet numbers. It attracts the best sailors in the world. What is it? What is it about the Moth that just makes it so dominating?
I don't know.
Because it's got some things going against it. It's bloody hard to sail.
The Moth's hard to sail.
Well, look, it's hard to sail. It's hard to sail well. I mean, foiling tacks, foiling jibes is tough. It develops pretty quick, which can make it fairly expensive. It's got some really high technology in there. It's got some things going against it, but it never seems to hurt it. The numbers were great at Perth, and there's a fleet growing in Melbourne again now. And I mean, the best sailors come and sail it all the time. They keep coming back.
Well, the thing about the Moth is it's really the only fully development class left, and the reason for that is it's so small, and it stayed within the realms of a home builder. It stayed within the realms of someone who's prepared to sell their first daughter or son.
Yes,
but it's not unachievable to get into a Moth and experience the pinnacle of a black. And I'm going to plug the Wasp here because I sail both.
Yeah.
And when I get out of the Moth into the Wasp, the first hour of sailing the Wasp, I'm thinking, yeah. And then after an hour, it's like, what was I thinking? This is so much fun because you get back into the groove of it and you know how to make it quick, and you can sail the Wasp really quick upwind now.
Yeah.
The Moth really kills it a bit downwind, but upwind, you know, you can be sitting easily on 14, 15 knots in a Wasp, good angles, and it's just you can just get that feeling where you know everything's working. And as soon as you get that with any boat, I think you're in somewhere that's just awesome. You know, you look at racing car drivers, you're sailing. It's just the people who are really into it, are really winning, are the ones that are just so comfortable in their boat. And one of the things about the Moth is that you can make any adjustment you want to make it comfortable. Now, I sailed the Wally windsurfers for a couple of years back in 2000, and because I couldn't change anything, I learned how to contort my body to get it to work, and got really quick. But I had to stop because I did my knee in because I had to contort. Whereas the Moth, you know, my Moth's a bit different to everyone else's because I'm going, well, I can't do that, so I have to work out how to make it so I can do that.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. It's you know, it's got a huge history. You know, the first championship was in 1928.
Yeah, I was going back through the Moth World Championships last night. I can't believe how far back it goes.
Yeah, well, the World Championship is not that far, but the first championship for a Moth, I think wasn't called the Moth then, but it morphed into the Moth. It was the Inverloch 11 or something, and I think a few years later it became the Moth. But that trophy has a champion from 1928. Wow. Now that's a huge history. So it's you know, coming up to 92 years old. So it's just one of those boats that keeps, you know,
evolving.
You can never be perfect. You always know that there's someone else who can do something better.
All right. Well, I'll finish off the Moth class with this question: who's the best Moth sailor that you've seen? You've been around a while. You've seen a fair few good ones, win world titles on that. Have you got one that just stands out as going, yep, I mean, he does things that the others just don't?
I'd have to say Pete Burling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Tom showed us how it was done in Perth. There's no doubt about that. Goodison, you know, both ex-laser world champions, gold medalists. But the one guy who just stands out to me, I mean, it's Nathan, of course. You know, they're all very different sailors, and you know, Tom's a real grunty sailor, a little bit technical, not too bad. Paul Goodison sort of learned how to be technical, a bit of a grunty sailor, sort of a little bit lucky, I think, to be at the right place at the right time, but also worked pretty hard to get where it was. But when I look at, you know, I've spent a lot of time with Peter, I've spent a lot of time with Nathan, and just seeing how they do things. And Nathan's ability to pick that wind on the water is incredible. But Pete takes that and puts the technical side with it, and it's just amazing how he can just make a boat work within a day. You just put him on a boat and he comes back and, oh no, hang on, move this, move that. No, I got to fair my foils, and you'll fair them. What do you think? Yep, okay. And no, it's a bit wrong there. Comes back the next day, faired them again, repainted them completely. Just the ability to know what works is amazing. And you know, his time in the Moth over the last 5-6 years has been almost zero.
Yeah, it's been very limited.
He's won the Worlds. He came second in 2007 in a boat that he stepped in 2 days before, that we hadn't even finished. Just insane, really insane.
It's pretty impressive. All right, let's jump on to the Wasp, because it is an amazing boat. I've been lucky enough to sail one and sail in a regatta and get whooped by you. It's pretty easy to see where the concept from the Wasp came from, but tell me about how the concept evolved into the boat that it is today.
I think you got to start with the immovable parameters that we put together to start with.
Okay.
the first immovable, and obviously it came from the Moth, and there's no doubt about that. And I was trying to create the experience that we had with the Moth in something that was just accessible to mainly younger people, and mainly because of money and skill sets that are available now. Not everyone has the skill set to either buy the Moth the way it needs to be or make it into the way it needs to be. So, and that's particularly your younger, your 15 to 25-year-olds. They certainly haven't had the apprenticeship that maybe you and I have had, or especially me. I reckon I had 3 apprenticeships with my dad before I was 12 years old, sort of thing. So anyway, the point is that, so the parameters were, it had to be half the cost of the Moth to buy, which we're actually better than now by quite a bit. Maybe we weren't better at to start with, but we've certainly evolved into being good. But that is only part of the equation. The total cost of ownership of the Wasp is, I don't know how much less it is, but it have to be a quarter at least.
It's a lot less. Yeah.
Because you can sell the boat easily when you want to. It doesn't devalue that much, and it probably will never really devalue if we keep doing what we're doing. I mean, not devalue, but it becomes obsolete, sort of thing. So that was one. Second one, had to have no stays. I've got too many things on arms and legs that stays were just not an option. So that was criteria number 2. The third thing is that the foils had to be completely reproducible, and they had to be a shitload cheaper than the Moth. And one of the reasons that particularly focusing on the cost of the foils is that they're the one thing that everyone damages. You hit things, scrape it on the concrete, the boat blows over, all these things that it had to be for something that you could, okay, I can put a new tip on that, or I can buy a new one, or whatever it was. But they had to be absolutely 100% reproducible without all this sanding and painting and that stuff. And so effectively that meant that it had to be aluminium and plastic. And so that morphed into that. Those requirements meant it was aluminium extrusion and plastic, hard anodized aluminium, so that they didn't scratch easy, and if anything did happen to them and people started to tear them, that would be very obvious. The tips we made as small as we could without losing significant performance. So because the tips are the most difficult part to control, you get shrinkage in the moldings and they scratch and all those things. So it was sort of that. Anyway, so that was rule number 3. The next one is that it had to go into the box like the Moth. So that was non-negotiable. That was the word I was looking for before. The wings had to fold up so that we could store them in a yacht club easily. Probably not as successful as I would have hoped in that you've still got trolley wheels sticking out, you've still got a fairly large foil sticking out, but it has helped in some cases to make them storage. And I mean, realistically, the whole thing had to be fun. And so everything we did was like, is this going to change the fun level, putting this in? No, yes, well, it's more expensive, so we don't do it. Or, yes, it is, it's worth doing. And so it's like, we weren't in any way trying to make it as fast as a Moth. We weren't trying to make it as sexy as a Moth, although I think it is. So how many iterations did we do? It's the most difficult design project I've ever done, because every time we changed anything, about every different part on the boat changed.
I was going to say, my next question is, how many prototypes did you go through?
Well, 0 with the hull, other than the first boat we built had a slightly different mast rake than what we have now.
Okay.
So the hull was set in stone from day one. Never changed. Didn't really change. So we handmade a few masts, and we handmade sails from old Moth sails to start with. We handmade the wing bars from crappy aluminium we got locally, which all bent, so we had to put other tubes inside. But really didn't change that much. The sail, yeah, we went through quite a lot of photos with that. It was tricky to get right. I'd say the mast was right from day one, because I had Alan Goddard here who did all the calcs. Not only did the calcs for the final mast, but did the calcs from these masts that we actually made from old carbon wing tubes we used on the blade rotor. We just sliced them all up and glued them together, and it was exactly what we expected it to be. Put it up and it worked exactly how we wanted it.
And was always going to be an unstayed mast?
No stays was
always.
That was a non-negotiable.
Okay.
Absolutely had to be non-negotiable. You know, that you just don't want a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old flying into a stay.
No.
And that's
a cheese grater, as they call it on the Moth.
Yeah, and it makes getting on the boat so much easier. You just get over the front and you're on. There's no stay in the road. You've got to get around.
And then the wishbone boom, because that's quite a unique thing to the boat. Like, you don't see too many boats sailing around with something like that.
Well, that really came from the fun thing, and we looked at fun and safety. Well, there was another. Well, yeah, that's one thing. And the safety side of it, there was a lot of things we did with the safety, like the foils have rounded backs, which make them hum a bit. They're not quite as efficient because of that, but it not only makes them safer when you fall on them, but they're much longer lasting because you're not got this fine edge that's going up and down a case. So the boom was partly about safety, not having a boom that can whack you in the head. But all our testing went, well, it's not detracting from the fun. Maybe we could get more control with the sail with all this newfangled Vang thing, but it also took all the tension out of the boat. It just made it very simple to make a rig and boat that were decoupled effectively, and that's, you know, one of the biggest issues with the Moth and the canting is that we have cant by default because we don't have stays. So if you've got a Vang going along, you have to then make sure that's decoupled with the boat, which is difficult in the space you've got below the sail. So, you know, to rotate the whole thing became tricky. So it was really, to me, a very obvious way of getting the sail nice and low on the boat. I mean, the sail's a lot lower than you get in a Moth because it's soft. You can just push your way under it. Yeah, a lot of detractors with that in the early stage. You know, why are you doing that? You know, it looks ugly, or, you know, it's flopping around. I mean, our original clamp of how the boom attached to the mast was really complicated, and it was a thing that rotated and all clamped on, so it was tight. And then one day we just said, do we really need that? Let's just tie it on. And it was like, well, didn't make any difference. It flopped around, didn't make any difference. And I do like to make things as beautiful as they can be, but when practicality just comes up to being better, I just won't compromise that.
I think one of the fun aspects of that, that you, as you're talking about, is how quickly you can be on the water. Like, you literally can be on the water in 10 minutes. The foil's in the boats, both the rudder and the centerboard. You roll your sail out, you chuck your mast in, you quickly put the boom on, and you're wheeling it down the beach ready to go. It's that quick, and it's a great fun boat.
When Tommy Trotman and I were doing a lot of testing over winter a couple of seasons ago, we were trying to work out whether we could improve the ventilation and the rear foil, and so we'd have races of rigging, and yeah, we got it down to I think about 3 minutes to rig a boat.
It's honestly, it is that good. You're on the water. If you finish work, and you go, geez, I'd like to go to sail, and you think, oh God, I've got to rig a boat for half an hour. That's a detractor, but this clearly is not.
Yeah.
So,
I often go sailing on the Wasp because I can do it over lunchtime.
Yeah, exactly. So how many Wasps are out there today? Because you've done extremely well.
We just ordered boat number 1000, which is coming here in a container. It's left China. I mean, that's not sold yet, but it probably will be. It's going to be wrapped in gold, and it's going to be raffled.
It's going to be your boat, I would have thought. It's going to be wrapped in gold. It's going to be your boat. It's sold. That's awesome.
1,000 Wasps.
And how? And remind me again when the Wasp first was born.
Born as in we started selling it.
Selling it. So what's the period that it's taken to get to 1,000 boats? 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years.
That's impressive. 5 years to have 1,000 boats on the water is fantastic. So you're in a category where there's a lot of other boats as well. Like there's the UFO, there's a few others out there. But what's making the Wasp so successful? I mean, 1,000 boats.
Oh my gosh. I think there's so many factors. There's so many things. I mean, I have to admit, when I first sailed the Wasp, the first prototype, I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted. I'm just going, what have I done? And I didn't realise how much we had to do to just learn how to sail it, learn the little things that were making it. We had the foil angles a little bit wrong. The sail was just a little bit wrong. We had different foil tips on. And there's just a lot of little things that just made it really disappointing to start with. And it took me probably a year to really come to terms with, I've done something really good here. But I just think the amount of thought. I mean, I did 6 years thinking about this. Probably 3 years of getting it to a point where we could build it. And then a year and a half of testing and prototyping. I mean, and I think that it sort of came from many years of sailing a Moth, and what did I enjoy about the Moth? How can we replicate this, and how can we make it so all the things that are annoying about the Moth go away? And you might have noticed that none of the non-negotiable parameters were that it had to be easy to sail. That was not ever part of the negotiation. It is what it is, and we weren't trying to make it easy. We weren't trying to make it so, anyone can get off this and sail it. Now, there's been a lot of boats like that. The UFO is a bit about, you've got your stable platform. The Skeeter is a bit like that. There's other boats that say, stability is important, but it's not. You look at all the successful things, it's not ever about being easy. It's about just being right, being fun, being a challenge. We didn't try to make it hard, that's for sure, but it's just like, if this worked better but it made it more unstable, or it made it a bit harder, that wasn't part of the design factor. So I just think, we did a lot of work to get it so things fit together, that they fitted, But I think also that, Mark and Nick Bears, Mark Ablett and Nick have been huge in creating a idea of the class as well. And I think we've really nailed it. Because
the culture's pretty amazing in the class, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, I did the Victorian State titles, and it was just fun. It was probably the funnest regatta I've ever done.
And everyone's so helpful. Everyone's everyone. There's a few guys that want to win, We all want to win, but no one's putting that in front of going, I want to have a good time and I want to make sure everyone has a good time.
I think that definitely leads me into my next question is the Wasp games. Tell me about that, because you don't have a Wasp World, sorry.
Well, we're trying to stay the right side of world sailing. World sailing has a thing that says that you cannot call a championship a world championship unless you're an international class recognised by world sailing. And we're not convinced we want to go down that path yet. But we don't want to be doing stuff that says, we're a bad operator. We are using their rules, which is copyrighted by them. So we have an obligation to at least play by their rules. And playing by their rules is that we can't call it a world championship. So the Wasp Games, it is, which I don't think is a real problem. It'd be nice.
And it's not all about the racing, is it? Because the ones that you had in Europe a couple of years ago at Lake Garda, there's slalom events and, there's seminars and people learn about all sorts of things through the whole regatta. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing of being locked down for the last 6 months has actually been sort of good for us because we've been doing a lot of work. We've now got a GPS challenge that's come online. We've done a licensing agreement with GPS Speed Surfing who do the windsurfing GPS. So we've now got our own separate platform for that, and you can go and enter and do Wasp stuff. We have got a virtual reality thing coming on where you can race in virtual reality, which is actually a lot cooler than I thought it would be, and actually is quite difficult in that, if you try and get going without bearing away and letting the sail out, it will just dog in the water and just going, why won't it go? Oh yeah, that's right. You got to do this. So, it's got a headset and the whole thing. And all of this eventually is going to become part of what we call a race hub, where you get ranked overall. Wow. So it won't just be being on the water racing, it's actual virtual racing as well.
Jesus, it's really taking the sailing to the future. So that's my next question. Where do you see the class going in the future? But you're basically answering it already.
Yeah, well, that is the thing. It's we want to see it just being the go-to class to have fun, and whether it be watching it, whether it be going racing, whether it be going slalom sailing, whether it be going to your local thing and seeing if you can go faster than anyone else with a GPS, whether it be virtual racing with your mates locally or around the world, and then just having it, bring it to 2020, really.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be no off-season now. There'll be no winter. You'll be able to sail on your couch during winter. Perfect. So, look, I'm going to jump into the last few questions. Where do you see sailing as a whole heading in the future? Have you got any opinions on that?
Where's sailing going? I think it feels like for us we're driving where sailing's going, and that's why we are not jumping in with world sailing, because there's some restrictions that we don't agree with if we become an international class, and we want to be really nimble in how we move to make this. I keep going back to fun. If we are restricted in any way of making this class fun, then we won't do it. And that's why we have been very cautious about going with world sailing. So we feel we're driving what the future of sailing is going to become. And there's other things I can't talk about yet.
That's fair enough.
But I just think that sailing it can be very old. Sailing around a set of sticks every weekend is just not the only thing you can do. There's so many other things we can do. And so yeah, we can influence world sailing and we can change the way, but it takes time. We don't have that time. We don't have the manpower to be the politician as well as the driving force. So we see that what we're doing is where sailing's going.
And foiling as a mainstream, do you see that happening, or it's just going to have its place amongst sailing?
I think it should be just having a place amongst sailing. I think that I still love non-foiling sailing. I love sailing, basically. But I think that, training, obviously, for, eventually I'll probably get some state old boat because I'll be 80 and I want to keep sailing. But that doesn't mean that there's not a place in the middle for youngsters to also enjoy that side of sailing, because I just think that if a Moth can sail in 4 knots, but we never race in it. I mean, it can foil in 4 knots, but you can't race in it because you can't get up, and if there's turbulence from any other boat, then you won't foil. So realistically, a Moth needs 7 knots to race, and it probably Wasp needs 8 knots to race properly. So there's a huge gap if you say, well, anything under 8 knots you don't sail in, because there's a lot of parts of the world that's a lot of the time. And I think the more we cut that part of sailing out, I think we're losing a part of it. And I know a lot of people who sail foiling boats go, oh, it's all boring. Well, it's not. It's just that you're not good at it, or you're not used to it, or but there's so much finesse about sailing a non-foiling boat as well as a foiling boat. So
yeah, exactly. You must feel very internally proud about what you've brought to sailing as a whole, because I mean, you're definitely one of the founders of foiling. I mean, I know foiling's been around for years and years and years, but I mean, it's amazing how much sailing's evolved in the last, say, 12 years. I mean, the Cup wasn't foiling 12 years ago, but it is now. And you've got the Sail GP boats, and really, you were one of the first people to really push this foiling, genre with the, the Blade Rider and the Mac 2, and look where the Moth is now. So it's got to be a good feeling, because you're definitely one of the ones that pioneered it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yes, I am, but you're still only as good as your last boat. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of
Moths do dry laps. They don't touch down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool. I come from A class, and I mean, we might be able to line up against you and match you now, but as soon as we hit a corner, see you later. There goes 300 meters, and we're not catching you back up again. I mean, that's a pretty cool factor that you've been able to make work.
I don't know. Am I proud? Yes, I'm proud. I'm really happy that it's become mainstream, and that a lot of people have taken it a lot further than I could have. I'm really glad that I haven't tried to just go, we're going to get into every part of foiling, and because realistically, a lot of these boats have been really good because I just focused on what I was good at. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that I reckon we've done right, and a lot of things I am proud of, but I'm not finished yet.
My last question, and I end every interview with this question. Looking back, what advice would you give a younger Amac before he started all the KA sales and Blade Rider and Mac 2? What would you say to him now before he goes about all that activity?
Should have stayed in software, mate.
Fair enough.
No. What advice would I give? Jesus. So many things.
It's a hard question to ask, and it stumped a few of my guests, but I have to bring in a mentor of mine here.
who believed in me and still does believe in me and changed my life because of it. And that's Lex Bertrand. And I walk with him quite often still. And he was a guy who just recognized that there was something there that I didn't see. And I think, so my advice, I think, to the younger Amac was find a mentor earlier that lets you grow in the belief and the confidence of yourself. Because, you know, when you're good at something, you don't really understand that you're good at it because it just seems so easy. You know, there's some stuff that I can do really easily and I just think, why can't everyone can do that? You know, and maybe for me it's seeing 3D stuff. I can just see it. I can see it in my head, and then it's very sometimes annoying having to draw it because I already know it. Why do I have to draw it? Oh God, I've got to communicate this to somebody. But I never saw that as something I was really good at until, you know, I started working with other people, and you're just going, I'm really good at that. And or maybe they're not good, they're crap. And so so yeah, I think the advice I'd give is find a mentor, find many mentors, talk to them, find people that you admire and help you get on your journey, because I didn't. I was very much a loner. I was very much, because I didn't even think that there was anything to grow. I didn't understand that, didn't get it. So, you know, a lot of the stuff, but having said that, that time alone, that time of, you know, getting into the computers, getting into building stuff, getting into, you know, just not being social and not being part of the community, not being, and just spending it, put me where I am. But I think I could have done a lot more had I had the confidence to go, hey, let's pull in a lot of people and let's make this happen, because I'm good at that and I can get someone else who's good at that, and we can make this really good. And that's, I guess, sort of where I'm at now. And now I'm trying to work out how can I actually employ other engineers without being pissed off with them or them being pissed off with me.
Very good. All right, mate. Look, I really appreciate you coming on board. It's been awesome to have you. Yeah, thanks, Amac, for jumping on board.
You're welcome. Thanks. It was fun. See ya.
All right.